Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 5th of August, and as always, we encourage you and your community to be weather aware and weather ready by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. You can always check the weather anytime you like using the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find information during your day on Facebook using the page NWS Alaska. NWS Alaska is also the account on Twitter for all of the state, but if you like to localize a little bit, you can get information about thunderstorms as you did this morning from the NWS Fairbanks office. Sometimes you'll get information about the weather to come from NWS Anchorage and also NWS Juneau. On YouTube in the afternoon, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing. You can do that from the NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks accounts there, or simply look for the hashtag AKwx. And following this broadcast from our broadcast partner here at Alaska Public Media, you can go to their homepage and watch this entire show a little bit later in the evening, or simply go to YouTube and type in AKwx TV, or Alaska Weather TV for short, and you'll find that complete show there. Here's a look at what's going on around our region. It's been a while since we've had red flag warnings, but that's where we are tonight. The areas shaded in red include the Copper River Basin as well as the eastern Alaska Range. And the reason we're having red flag warnings again, which is of course a fire weather alert, is because of the winds coming up, and those winds have reached the threshold that, combined with the dry brush, could exacerbate or enhance wildfire conditions should something start. So we're letting the fire managers know and all the fire crews that are still around Alaska, these places here, the eastern Alaska Range and parts of the Copper River Basin, could have some a little bit more trouble if a fire begins. And again, those are red flag warnings just to about midnight tonight. Something else to keep track of on the other end of the scale is our sea ice, and we're still watching this very slow melt of the sea ice pack. You'll notice there are some holes there, and the areas around the Hannah Shoal has pretty much disintegrated almost entirely now. We've got still ice from Kaktovik to Dead Horse and all the way out to Barrow, so this is still preventing barge traffic from making it all across the Beaufort Seacoast. But as we go ahead in time, the slow melt and the very slow drift to the south and west might start to show some movement back to the north and northeast in the next 4 to 5 days there, especially waiting to see what the next round of winds coming out of the Chukchi Sea do as we head toward the weekend. So we're still watching the ice pack carefully around the Beaufort Seacoast. This is always online for you to check out anytime you like at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice.php. And when you go to that page, you'll find even more information than we're showing you here. This is the pretty version. The real version looks like a patchwork quilt, and that patchwork describes the concentrations of the ice pack, and you'll also find a well-written discussion of what you can expect over the next 5 days, the movements and the concentrations and the confidence of that forecast there, all from our sea ice experts at the Anchorage National Weather Service office serving all of Alaska's sea ice edge. That's a look at what's going on in the broad scale. For fire danger, again, we were focusing around the Copper River Basin and the eastern Alaska Range, but you'll notice there are some other places across the Yukon Valley, around the Seward Peninsula, and even in Southwest that have seen their fire danger grow just in the last couple of days. We've had plenty of sunny weather across parts of the interior, and it has been pretty warm for many accounts. For most of July, it has been a substantially warm period, especially in south central and southwestern Alaska. Still no fire weather concerns for our friends in southeast. Sorry, you'll have to miss out on that one. As we look ahead, you'll notice that, let's see if I can get the right button here. There we go. It makes a big difference. The satellite picture shows the main storm track continues to be across the south, but right on the southern edge we have 2 typhoons. One of those already passed Hawaii, another one getting very close to the coastal areas of eastern Asia. This moisture is just a sign that the seasons are changing. It's not unusual to see these Pacific typhoons recurve, with at least a taste of their moisture making its way into the North Pacific and eventually the Gulf of Alaska. Will this directly impact Alaska? It's way too soon to say that for sure, but it is something that it's always interesting to watch and see how those show up on our satellite pictures going ahead for the next week or two. Keep your eye up on areas north of the Bering Strait, though. Watch the clouds start to move from northwest to southeast. The Arctic is waking up a little bit. It's starting to get ready to open for business. It's not entirely ready to go to town just yet, but a sign that the weather is shifting a little bit with the decreasing daylight now across Alaska. It's making it slightly more easy for that cooler weather to drop southward. And as it does so, we start to see weather changes like we saw today across Fairbanks. As cooler air drops southward, low pressure worked up along that boundary and enhanced an area of showers and thunderstorms earlier this morning. And then a second wave came through during the afternoon. So if you were around, let's say, Anderson and Clear Air Force Base, or perhaps up around Fairbanks toward Eagle, you probably had your fair share of rain and thunder, or at least knew about it very close to home. You can see that cluster of showers and thunderstorms late this afternoon here, and what was remaining from this morning had moved to areas north of Eagle and to an Arctic village region and out across the Alcan border into the northern parts of the Yukon. Also this morning, saw plenty of clouds across the eastern Gulf. Here's a low pressure center, and a wave of that frontal boundary worked right across Kodiak today, bringing about a quarter inch of rain there. Temperatures stayed fairly warm ahead of that front for south central Alaska, and southwestern Alaska saw morning cloud cover there. But watch as a lot of that simply evaporated and dried up, and plenty of sunshine was had across the Copper River Basin, across the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, as well as areas around the Koyukuk, Noatak, and Kobuk River valleys, and Norton Sound also saw plenty of sunshine there, even areas around Nome getting a nice taste of the sun today. But once again, showers and thunderstorms are ongoing around the interior, and that will continue tracking from southwest to northeast tonight. Remember your lightning safety rules. No matter what part of Alaska you're in, chances are you've probably seen or heard thunder or lightning at least once in your lifetime, and for many of us in the interior, probably a lot more than that. The lightning safety rules are really easy. When thunder roars, go indoors, and then wait 30 minutes from the last time you see that lightning flash or hear the sound of thunder. 30 minutes is usually enough time for that thunderstorm to fall apart or move away. And after it does so, then it's safe to go back outside and resume whatever activities you were having fun doing, or perhaps it's maybe a little bit of a yard work out there. Well, 30 minutes is usually enough time to allow that thunderstorm to get a safe distance away and for you to resume those activities. So remember, and kids, you can do this one easily too. When thunder roars, go indoors, and then wait about 30 minutes until you go back outside. Here's a look at the surface weather chart. Low pressure sitting across the western Gulf at about 1,008 millibars. Here's the triple point where the occluded part of the front comes together with cold air and meets up with warm air. This section here usually produces a little bit more precipitation and sometimes a little more wind. As this moves northward, this will increase the winds a little bit across the northern Gulf. It's also pushing warm and wet air slowly towards southeastern Alaska, and by all accounts this afternoon, temperatures were warm once again in some places like the central and northern parts of the Panhandle. A few more clouds around Haines and Skagway today. Up north, here is low pressure sitting right along the Alcan border and north of Eagle, dragging showers and thunderstorms in from the south and west. There's another batch of that moving through the middle interior right now. And high pressure has made it to the Chukchi Seacoast at 1,022 millibars. North and east of that, we have fog right up along the coast. You can see that stratus and fog trying to work its way in, and a north and easterly flow is pushing cooler weather in from the Beaufort Seacoast with showers and thunderstorms just to your south. High pressure sitting across the Bering at 1,028 millibars. Of course, fog and stratus surrounding that high pressure center. And just in the bottom part of your screen, you can see the next wave of low pressure trying to work northward. With that comes a better chance for east and northeasterly winds for the central and western chain, as well as periods of rain for Adak, Atka, and out around Shemya. Low pressure across the north and eastern Gulf at 1,008 millibars will start to fall apart. We had fronts attached to that just a few moments ago. By later tonight, that boundary will start to mix up enough that it's not truly a weather front anymore, showing a very sharp or discernible temperature change as it passes. Rainfall will spread across the central and northern parts of southeast all the way to Yakutat and into parts of Prince William Sound, perhaps around Resurrection Bay and down the coast toward the Barren Islands a little bit. A front dropping out of the interior will start to fall apart as it reaches the Alaska range, but the circulation of low pressure there will still be with us, so don't be surprised if there's still a few rumbles of thunder into the early morning hours tonight. High pressure will settle up across the Beaufort seacoast at 1,021 millibars, and that is feeding warm air back across the Bering Strait and points across the Chukchi seacoast again tonight. Meanwhile, colder air is building across eastern Asia and Siberia, moving eastward by Thursday. Another surge of cooler air will start to gather a little bit more across the central Yukon, as well as the Yukon Flats, and point southward into the middle Tanana Valley later tomorrow. Along that boundary, we should see showers out ahead of that. Easy for me to say. You can try that 5 times fast. Low pressure across the eastern Gulf at 1,010 millibars will also push warm and wet air back into southeastern Alaska, so expect showers there. Low pressure still sitting across the North Pacific at 1,003 millibars. That is working a southerly flow into the central chain. With that, more rain and cloud should be expected. And notice high pressure hasn't budged across the Bering. That means more stratus and fog for you. However, just enough dry air has moved into the YK Delta, Bristol Bay, and areas around Norton Sound that you should maintain a relatively clear day for most areas. Coastal areas, it may flirt with your region just a little bit, but most of the west and the Norton Sound region should be in the clear for your Thursday. As we get into Friday, that cool air has won the day across the Chukchi seacoast and drops southward into the Yukon Valley. Another circulation here across the middle interior should allow some warm and wet air to travel from southwest to northeast once again across the eastern interior. We'll have to wait and see if we have more than showers for Friday, but don't be surprised if there's enough energy in the atmosphere, you might get another round of showers and storms along toward your end of the week. Low pressure across the North Pacific is still dawdling out across the west at 995 millibars. That boundary is lifting northward. It's no longer a front. It's just a wave of low pressure, and with that comes a chance for clouds and showers, but that forcing may not be as strong, so the winds or the temperature change probably won't be as noticeable. And out across southeast, you're in for some more light rainfall. Periods of light rain and showers should be expected for Friday, with south central looking at a mainly clear day, and more sunshine is expected for southwest and parts of the eastern interior around Eagle and Northway. Here's a look at temperatures today then. We saw most areas in southeast back in the 60s and 70s. Looks like there were a few cooler spots in the upper 50s, but Ketchikan and Annette made it into the lower to mid 60s today. Sitka was looking at 60 degrees and Juneau closer to 64. Around Prince William Sound, we were back in the mid 60s for Valdez and Cordova, 70 in Anchorage, mid 60s for Kenai down to Homer. Seward was 61. Golcana hit nearly 80 degrees by late afternoon. It was 81 in Northway. And you saw temperatures in Fairbanks closer to 75. 67 in Eagle's not quite right. They made it well into the lower 80s today. 83, I think, was your magic number. And 64 in Fort Yukon was the afternoon temperature. It was in the 30s for Anaktuvuk Pass, and we saw a few spots in the Arctic coast, including Barrow and Point Thompson, drop into the upper 30s this afternoon. Wainwright was 41. At Kasuki, you're 43. Kivalina closer to 60 degrees. It was 62 in Kotzebue, 58 in Nome, about the same there in Unalakleet. McGrath made it to 76, I believe, about the same there in Tanana. Grayling was in the lower 60s, Bethel 65 degrees. Most of the coastal YK villages were in the mid to upper 50s. Cape Newenham was 52. King Salmon and Dillingham just shy of 70 today. And our friends in the Alaska Peninsula were in the lower to mid 50s in most stations. A few places like Sandpoint hit 63, and upper 40s and 50s for the areas around the central Aleutians, including Adak and Atka, and 47 out in Attu. Now, overnight low temperatures will cool into the lower to mid 50s for parts of the interior and southeast. South central closer to 50 degrees and upper 40s for Prince William Sound. Low 30s for the Arctic coast. Southwest in the upper 40s to mid 50s there, a little bit warmer around King Salmon and Dillingham. And 42 is expected in Nome, with the chain and the peninsula in the upper 40s to lower 50s. Kodiak near 53 with a high of 65 tomorrow. Southeast upper 50s to lower 60s, with south central in the upper 60s and lower 70s, so a little cooler tomorrow. The interior closer to 70 degrees. The Arctic coast upper 40s to lower 50s. Nome near 61. Kotzebue Sound temperatures below 60 degrees by a few degrees. And lower to mid 70s for southwestern Alaska and the Kuskokwim Valley. McGrath and places like Bethel should make it into another warm day with mid 60s to mid 70s for you. Kodiak again in the mid 60s. Flying weather shows IFR conditions around the Beaufort Sea coast through the Bering Strait and just flirting with the west coast early in the morning, with improvements to be seen by late day. IFR conditions south of Sitka and into parts of the Dixon entrance tomorrow, and also along the Bering Strait or the Bering Sea coast for the Aleutians as we head through your Thursday. Your pass conditions include some improving weather for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass tomorrow, both heading for VFR conditions by the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see smooth sailing, but as you go a little bit further east, start watching for more clouds in the afternoon. Probably still VFR conditions for Rainy Pass and Windy Pass, but once you get to Isabel Pass and probably a little bit further east, you'll start to see more afternoon clouds and even an increasing threat for some showers there around Mentasta Pass, so we're going to call MVFR there. Tanita Pass looks like visual flight rule through most of your Thursday. The same goes for Portage Pass and Chilkoot and White Pass. We expect to see marginal conditions through most of the day with a few more clouds in the region. Freezing levels show the cold air is dropping southward there. Levels as low as 2 to even 4,000 feet, moving right up against the Brooks Range. And we've got a cooler pocket of air across the central Gulf now as that low pressure system's been working slowly eastward. Out across the west, you can see slightly cooler weather, but overall there is still plenty of warmth hovering right over Alaska, which most of the state right around 10 to even 12,000 feet for freezing levels. So icing's not a huge concern, but we've got some light to isolated moderate trying to work in across the Chukchi Seacoast. Most of that's above 8,000 feet. And the same goes for the batch of moisture along the Alcan and into the northern Gulf. Most of that is above 8 to 10,000 feet. There are some pockets of higher concentration moisture right around the Wrangell-St. Elias region and around the Alcan south of North Wayne-Toke. And above 12,000 feet for the central and western chain. Once again, you have to go pretty high up there to find some of that icing potential. The jet stream shows the polar jet is dropping southward. It has a little bit of a wave working through the eastern parts of our state, and the main storm track across the North Pacific is still fairly slow. Wind speeds there from 75 to about 80 knots, but several disturbances there have made their way into the Gulf, and that will continue, with a little bit of a ridge building in across the North Pacific and into the southern Bering. Light westerlies are working through the interior and across the west coast at 15 to 20 knots. A slightly faster flow crossing areas in the Chukchi Sea coast around 40 knots, and you'll see that at 3,000 feet as well. A weak circulation across the Yukon, drawing in light winds for the interior. Offshore winds coming down through Cook Inlet and across the northern Gulf at 15 to 20 knots there, a little bit faster on the south side. And light southeasterly flow working across the Panhandle, only around 10 knots for your daytime tomorrow. So turbulence potential, it's very hit and miss, and most of that is above 1,000 feet to below 3,000 feet in the east, below 5,000 feet, looking for light to isolated moderate for the Chukchi Sea coast, and a little bit of chop above 1,000 feet for the central and western chain. Most of that, again, light to isolated moderate at worst. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
This message is in support of the 2005 NOAA Safe Sanctuaries exercise. This is only a drill.
Emergency responders continue to address environmental impacts.
From the 800-foot container ship aground on Elbow Reef in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary.
Every year, NOAA responds to thousands of natural and human-induced incidents threatening life, property, and natural resources. During such incidents, NOAA is mandated to protect natural resources, provide weather data, and chart navigable waterways. To better fulfill this mission, NOAA conducted the first Safe Sanctuaries exercise in April of 2005 to bring together NOAA resources and expertise with other agencies for a hypothetical oil spill in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary.
Briefly, the situation is, as we know,
the planning unit calls in NOAA's Navigation Response Team. The reef bottom surrounding the wreck site is variable and difficult to navigate, especially for large vessels. So the Navigation Response Team uses a sophisticated side-scan sonar that creates real-time, high-resolution images of the sea floor. After mapping several transects, the strips are mosaicked together into a map. The map can then be coupled with marine charts and enables the planning unit to develop a salvage plan that will be the least disruptive to the sanctuary's sensitive environment. As information on the oil's fate becomes clearer, the Scientific Support Coordinator prepares shoreline characterization and assessment teams to evaluate shoreline impacts. These assessment teams include members from state and federal agencies and the responsible party, some of whom have never measured effects of an oil spill before. To standardize the assessment team efforts, NOAA runs training for the team members before they go into the field.
The number of
Given the potential spill trajectories, the Scientific Support Coordinator deploys teams on 2 locations along Key Largo's eastern shore. They specifically record percent cover of oil on affected beaches and wildlife that has been oiled, such as seabirds or turtles. Returning to the command post, the assessment team leader presents the team findings to the environmental unit.
The northernmost area is where we saw the heaviest hit by oil, and it was along...
Also on scene is one of NOAA's Natural Resource Damage Assessment teams. This team collaborates with other groups from the Department of the Interior and State of Florida to work most effectively with a responsible party. This damage assessment team sends out assessment experts and sanctuary divers. They gather information on the natural and cultural resources that were harmed and at risk from the ship grounding and oil spill. Historical and cultural resources impart important knowledge of maritime history in the region. In this incident, the Portsmouth trader ran aground on a 1917 wreck, the City of Washington.
Due to the oil spill, we were only able to assess the injury to the anchor damage that occurred, and we found 2 anchor scars.
A marine archaeologist from the sanctuary evaluates the injury to the City of Washington, as it represents a significant historic site and is listed on the Florida Keys Shipwreck Trail. Using information provided by the Navigation Response and Damage Assessment teams, the Unified Command develops the best strategy to extricate the trader and avoid further injury to both the reef and the historical wreck. The Portsmouth Trader exercise also provides an important opportunity for NOAA to evaluate and improve its response and safety procedures. To check the accuracy of the oil trajectory model and provide another set of observations to understand surface currents in the Florida Keys, 2,000 wooden drift cards were released near the grounding site. The reef structure, tidal currents, Gulf Stream, and winds make this area tricky to predict currents. And over the next 2 days, oceanographers monitor the drift card movement. In this case, these biodegradable cards move straight into the mangroves along Key Largo's eastern shore, confirming the trajectory model outputs created earlier in the response.
The public is reminded to avoid touching the oiled areas or wildlife due to human health concerns and possible wildlife injury.
Throughout a spill response, public safety is also a key concern. NOAA sends out an all-hazards radio broadcast, warning people of natural and man-made disasters. The Safe Sanctuaries exercise and real groundings like it represent continuing risks to our coral reefs, shorelines, and marine resources. NOAA recognizes these threats and continually develops and tests effective response plans to protect life, commerce, and our natural and cultural resources.
It's never going to come out good. I mean, it's always bad because somebody loses, but it can come out better if everybody's working together. If you got a cooperative RP, if you got, the Coast Guard is being able to play the role they need to play, if all the state agencies and the local communities are able to play the roles they can play. And if NOAA gets to play the role we can play, then you bring everything together, people cooperate, and it'll come out less bad than it could otherwise.
Time for your marine forecast now. In southeast Alaska, light southeasterly winds will pick up a little bit more tomorrow, about 15 to 20 knots or so across the inner and outer coasts. Looking for 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside and 5 to 6 foot seas on the outside. 20 knots there just south of Yakutat with a southeast wind with a 5 foot sea tomorrow. That becomes a northeasterly flow at 15 knots for Friday with south and easterly winds continuing south of Cross Sound and south of Sitka. It's 20 knots with a 6 foot sea. On the inside, though, winds will go almost calm. Very light winds if that and very flat seas. 2 foot seas expected there at worst on Friday. For the Lynn Canal down towards Stevens Passage, a light southeast flow inside of Clarence Strait with a 2-foot sea on Friday. Looks like a pretty nice day on the inside. For South Central, a light and variable flow inside of Prince William Sound, only 10 knots or so with northeasterly winds across the north and western Gulf, 15 knots there with a 4 to 5-foot sea. Northwesterlies blowing off Kodiak Island, and a south and westerly flow through Shelikof Strait west of the Barrens and up through Cook Inlet, 10 to 15 knots with a 3 to 4-foot seas in those areas. Those winds also go very light on Friday, 10 knots in just about all areas with the exception of areas east of the Barrens, Shelikof Strait, and east of Kodiak Island. Those are around 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas for Friday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, westerly flow at 10 to 15 knots on the Bering Sea side, and inside Bristol Bay, those seas could run around 6 feet. Northwesterlies coming off the peninsula at 15 knots with a 4-foot sea are expected on Thursday. By Friday, the wind shift just a little bit to the south and west, still holding around 15 knots with a 4-foot sea, and light and variable flow develops north of Cold Bay and along the Bering Sea coast into Bristol Bay, where we get back into that westerly wind around 15 knots with a 3-foot sea for Friday. For the Aleutians, a light and variable wind north of Unalaska and Nikolsky, only around 10 knots or so. Northerlies will be found on the Pacific coast. And then we get into the circulation surrounding low pressure across the North Pacific, and those winds come up to about 20 to 30 knots. Again, small craft advisories are posted for many areas there with 4 to 9-foot seas, 10-foot seas in fact around Kiska to Attu, with a northeasterly flow developing the further west you go. By Friday, not a whole lot of change in the west, 20 to 25 knots from the southeast to northeast the further west out you go. More of a southerly flow develops across the central and eastern chain. That's holding around 15 to 20 knots with 3-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast and 5 to 8-foot seas across the Pacific coast, wrapping up the end of the week. Now across the west coast, westerlies are coming in south of St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island as high pressure sitting west of the Pribilofs. A light wind will be closer to the Pribilof Islands with northwesterly winds on either side of Nunivak Island around 15 knots. For Friday, the winds start to become a little more variable and light west of Hooper Bay all the way out towards St. Matthew. Westerlies around St. Lawrence Island at 15 knots, same expected around Kuskokwim Bay, and light and variable winds around the Pribilofs with a 3-foot sea for your Friday. And for the Arctic coast, northerlies coming into Kaktovik around 10 knots, very light easterly winds north of Prudhoe Bay, and south and easterly flow coming off the Chukchi Sea coast. Look at the winds pick up as you head north out of Kotzebue Sound, as much as 25 knots west of Cape Lisburne and offshore of Point Hope. Those winds become westerly again to 20 knots as we head into Friday. Southwesterlies coming up the Chukchi Sea coast, and easterly winds pick up for areas around Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay, and north of Barrow, a southeasterly flow with a 4-foot sea on a 20-knot wind there for your Friday. Recapping tonight's weather, showers and thunderstorms will continue across the middle and eastern interior following a cold front working through and low pressure very close to home. Those showers will wind up as you head into the early morning hours, but more could be in the offing as we head toward the end of the week. Light rains expected for southeast. The winds will come up for the central and western chain as low pressure approaches, and colder air is dropping southward into the Chukchi Sea coast as we head into Thursday and Friday, with sunshine expected for south central and southwest for the end of the week. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.